Have you ever stopped to wonder why your school experience was the way it was? Might seem kind of random, but behind every classroom, every lesson plan, and every single teacher, there's a secret plan, a hidden blueprint that's been shaping education for centuries. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain and take a look at those plans.
Really think about it. Why was your history class just a long series of lectures and dates you had to memorize, while your science class was all about getting your hands dirty with experiments? Why did one teacher seem like this all-knowing sage, and another one acted more like a coach? Well, I'm here to tell you, these aren't just accidents. They're the direct result of some really powerful and often competing ideas about what education is even supposed to be for.
The answer to all of this? It actually lies in 4 fundamental blueprints. These are the core philosophies that have been battling it out for centuries: idealism, naturalism, pragmatism, and existentialism. Once you understand them, it's like you've found the secret instruction manual for the entire educational system.
So here's our game plan. We're going to start with a quick side-by-side of all 4 blueprints. Then we'll take a deep dive into each one: the world of perfect ideas, the classrooms of nature and practice, and the personal journey of the individual. After that, we'll meet the masterminds who actually design these plans, and finally, we'll bring it all back to you. Sound good? Let's go!
Okay, before we start breaking them down one by one, let's get a bird's eye view. This is how these 4 big ideas stack up against each other.
Now this table right here, this is basically our Rosetta Stone for this whole topic. Just look at the first row for idealism. It says reality is all about ideas and spirit, and knowledge is something you're born with. But then, jump down to naturalism, it argues the complete opposite. Reality is the physical world, and you only know what your senses tell you. Then you've got pragmatism, which says, hey, reality is always changing, and truth is just whatever works. And finally, existentialism comes along and says, forget all that, reality is just your personal existence. What a clash of worldviews, right?
All right, let's explore our first blueprint, idealism. This is the philosophy that builds its entire world and its classrooms on the foundation of perfect, timeless ideas.
So for an idealist, the idea of something, like justice or beauty, is way more real and more perfect than any physical example you could ever find in our messy world. They believe our world is just a flawed shadow of a higher spiritual reality that's made of these pure ideas. So what's the goal of education then? It's to train your mind to see past all the shadows and grasp those perfect, eternal truths. And this philosophy creates a very specific kind of classroom. The teacher is front and center. They're the guide, the philosopher, the moral example who represents the ideals everyone is supposed to learn. And the student? Well, their role is to be a receptive vessel, to listen, to absorb, and to try and imitate the perfection that the teacher presents. It's a very top-down kind of system.
So what do you actually study in an idealist school? Well, you can probably guess. The focus is on the great, timeless subjects that deal with eternal truths. You're not there to learn temporary job skills. You're studying philosophy, ethics, classic literature, and the fine arts, the subjects that are supposed to build your character and connect you to something universal.
Okay, so we've been up in the clouds with abstract ideas. Let's come back down to earth. Our next section looks at 2 blueprints that are all about the real, tangible world: naturalism and pragmatism.
Naturalism pretty much flips idealism on its head. It says, forget about some supernatural world of ideas. The only reality is the natural world right in front of us. So real knowledge doesn't come from sitting quietly and thinking. It comes from direct sensory experience, from going outside, from observing, from touching, and just interacting with the environment. And check out what this does to the classroom roles. It's a total 180. The teacher steps way back from being the all-knowing authority figure. Instead, they're a facilitator, someone who sets up the environment so the student can discover things for themselves. The student is no longer just a passive listener, but an active explorer who's encouraged to follow their own curiosity.
Now for our next real-world philosophy: pragmatism. This one is the ultimate results-oriented approach. Pragmatists believe reality isn't some fixed, eternal thing. It's constantly changing. And truth? For them, something isn't true because it matches some perfect idea in the sky. It's true if it works, if it helps you solve a real problem in the real world. Simple as that.
And you can see this philosophy in action in the classroom. It's all about project-based learning, focusing on practical problems, and that famous mantra of learning by doing. So if you've ever had a class that was built around tackling one big, hands-on group project, congratulations! You've experienced the blueprint of pragmatism firsthand.
All right, our final blueprint shifts the focus completely.
We're moving away from universal ideas and practical realities to the single most important thing, you. We're now exploring the journey of the individual through existentialism, the blueprint of choice.
Existentialism makes a pretty radical claim. It says there's no predetermined meaning or purpose to life. Reality is simply your own individual existence. It is up to you and you alone to create your own values and define your own purpose through the choices you make. That puts a huge amount of emphasis on personal freedom and responsibility.
This completely changes the classroom dynamic, as you can imagine. The teacher is no longer an authority or even just a guide. They become more like a friend, a partner who helps the student on their personal journey of self-discovery. And the student is seen as this totally free individual who has to take absolute ownership of their learning and their choices.
Okay, these are some seriously powerful ideas, but where did they come from? They didn't just appear out of thin air. So let's meet some of the master thinkers, the actual architects who drew up these educational blueprints in the first place.
First up, you have to start with Plato, the father of Western idealism. This quote perfectly captures his whole philosophy. For Plato, the whole point of education wasn't to get a job or make money. It was this noble, epic quest to understand the perfect, unchanging ideas of truth, goodness, and beauty.
Next is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, a key architect of naturalism. He famously argued that we're all born good, but then we get corrupted by society. So for him, a real education meant protecting a child from society's bad influence and just letting them learn naturally, through their own experiences with the world.
And here we have John Dewey, the absolute giant of pragmatism in education. This one quote contains his entire philosophy. Dewey argued that school shouldn't be this boring place where you just get ready for the real world later. No, the classroom is the real world. Learning isn't about memorizing facts for some future test. It's about living and solving problems right here, right now.
So, we've explored the 4 major blueprints, and we've met some of their designers. Now for our final section, let's bring this all together and see how these big ideas actually show up in your own life.
Here's the most important takeaway from all of this. Modern schools are rarely just one of these pure philosophies. Instead, they're a blend, a mashup of all 4. And as you can see, these blueprints influence literally everything. The goals of the school, the subjects you have to take, the way teachers teach, and even the basic relationship between teachers and students.
So I want you to think back on your own time in school. Those lectures that were straight out of the idealist playbook, the science experiments that were pure naturalism, the big group projects right out of pragmatism, and maybe those moments when a teacher pushed you to find your own path, just like an existentialist. Which blueprint do you see the most? Which philosophy, when you really think about it, truly built your